The snowstorm raged without mercy, a swirling wall of white erasing the landscape around Elena's car. Her windshield wipers fought a losing battle, screeching against ice as they swept across the glass. Wind gusted hard enough to nudge her little sedan sideways, and she gripped the steering wheel tighter with every blast. Elena's eyes stung from exhaustion, but her mind refused to rest. 12 hours at the hospital for codes, one goodbye that hit too close to home. Now she was crawling through back roads, anxious to get home to silence and sleep. The woods around her looked ghostly, trees bending under snow's weight-like bowed shadows. The beam of her headlights split the storm, reaching out into the blizzard. She didn't notice anything at first, just white, white, and more white. Then her breath caught. Something was there. Her foot eased off the gas. She leaned forward, squinting through the snowflakes, just beyond the bend, where the road briefly hugged a set of railway tracks. Something shifted. Not a deer. Too low. Not a coyote. Too still. The silhouette was motionless, crouched. Her instincts screamed. She slowed to a crawl, heart pounding, trying to understand what she was seeing. Was it a dog? The shape trembled, once barely a shivered, and she knew something was alive out there, and it was in trouble. Her gloved hands shook slightly on the steering wheel. She hadn't taken this route in months. Voided it, actually. The railroad. Tracks reminded her too much of her father, of the calls he used to make during late-night shifts as a track worker. Always keep your eyes open, he used to say. Trains don't stop for anything. Elena swallowed the lump in her throat. Her chest ached with that old, quiet grief. She hadn't said his name out loud in a long time. But tonight she was driving through his ghost. It wasn't even supposed to snow like this, not. According to the weather app, she should have been home by now. If she hadn't stayed behind to help that little boy with a seizure. If she hadn't stopped to get gas. If she hadn't missed that green light, she wouldn't be here. Not now. Not at this exact moment, on this exact stretch of road, but something fate timing, God had pushed her into this night, onto this forgotten road, toward that shape on the tracks, and something inside her whispered, "You're meant to see this." Her headlights swung wide as she turned toward the crossing. That's when she saw it fully. Clearly, a German shepherd, stood directly on the tracks. His leg was twisted oddly, one paw caught between the rail and a slab of frozen wood. His coat was matted with snow and grime. He looked up as the light hit him, eyes wide, frozen not in fear, but in pain. Elena's heart nearly stopped. In the distance, barely audible through the storm, came a low, distant horn. The train. It was coming. The door slammed behind her with a hollow thud, swallowed by the storm. Elena didn't think she ran. Her boots sank into the thick snow, each step. A battle against the wind that clawed at her hair and coat. The world howled around her, but all she could hear was the shrill, distant horn of the oncoming train, growing louder with every heartbeat. The headlights of her car barely lit the path, but the figure on the tracks didn't move. The cold bit into her skin, her breath ripped from her lungs, but she pushed forward, her legs burning. "Please." She whispered to no one, "Don't let me be too late." Just steps from the tracks now. She stopped suddenly, completely. A German shepherd stood frozen in place. One paw was clearly twisted between two frozen rail ties. His coat, thick but soaked, clung to his shivering body. His ears were pinned back, lips curled in a soft, warning growl. Elena froze, breath puffing from her lips. "I'm not here to hurt you," she said softly. lowering herself a little. I just want to help. The dog growled again, but didn't. Lunge, his eyes amber, fierce, afraid locked with hers. She saw fire in them. Fear, yes. Pain, yes. But also something else, something unbroken, something desperate. The horn blasted, again closer now. Lights flickered through the trees. The rail began to vibrate underfoot. Her eyes darted from the injured paw to the dog's heaving chest, to the growing light down the track. She had seconds. If she moved too fast, he'd bite. If she didn't move at all, they'd both die. Think, move. Now, her fingers shook as she reached out. It's okay, boy, she murmured. Just give me a second. Let me help you. The train was rounding the bend. Alina dropped to her knees, snow instantly soaking through her scrubs. The cold cut into her bones, but she didn't feel it. All that mattered was the paw. Her hands hovered near the dog's leg. He flinched but didn't snap. She kept speaking nonsense words, soft words, anything to fill the space between them. Her fingers gripped the paw gently. The fur was damp and cold, crusted with ice. She traced the twist in the rail where it had locked him in. She tugged lightly. At first nothing. She tugged harder. Still stuck, the tracks began to quake beneath her. Oh God, she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. Please don't let this be the end. She gave one last puller, desperate, full-bodied wrench with both hands. The paw slipped free. The dog yelped. Alina screamed as the vibration thundered through her knees. Then, without thinking, she scooped her arms around the dog's shoulders and threw them both sideways into the snowbank beside the tracks. The train blasted past with a deafening roar. Wind and steel ripped the air around them. The force knocked snow into the air like a blizzard. Alina curled herself around the shepherd, her coat flaring over him like a shield. And then, silence. The ground stilled. The train was gone. Alina lay. On her side in the snow, her arms still wrapped around the dog. Her chest heaved, lungs burning from the cold and the terror. Her heart pounded in her ears, louder than the train had been. The shepherd didn't move at first. Then, slowly, he shifted. She expected him to run, but instead, he nudged her with his nose. Then, slowly, carefully, he lowered his head onto her chest. Alina let out a broken breath, her eyes blurring with tears. She cradled his head gently. I've got you now, she whispered. Alina laid an old blanket across the back seat of her car, carefully placing the wounded dog onto it. His body was heavy with exhaustion, but his eyes never left her. You'll be safe, just tonight, she said aloud, more to herself than to him at home. She opened the door slowly, unsure if he'd resist. But Shadow, she hadn't named him yet, not officially walked in without protest. He limped to a corner near the heater and curled up, groaning softly. Alina knelt beside him, her fingers brushing the ice from his fur. She didn't think about the fact that dogs weren't allowed in her building, or that she had no leash, no kennel, no plan. All she knew was this wasn't just a rescue. It was the beginning of something neither of them understood yet. By midnight, she had dressed his paw with a first aid kit she'd stolen from her old med bag, fed him leftover chicken from her fridge, laid towels around him to catch the melting snow. Still he wouldn't sleep. Neither could she. She sat nearby, nursing a cup of tea, watching the way his ears twitched at every creak and gust of wind. The shadows from the hallway light flickered across his body. Shadow, she whispered. The name came out of nowhere. It fits. The way he moved. The way he had appeared out of darkness and, yet, hadn't frightened her. He looked up at her, and, for the first time, she thought she saw a softness in his eyes. Not trust, not yet, but a truce. The next morning, Shadow growled when she entered the room too quickly. She froze. "It's okay," she murmured, hands raised. "I'm not going to hurt you." The growl stopped, but the tension didn't. He flinched when she reached for the food bowl. He ducked his head at the sound of a microwave beep, and when she set down a broom, he darted beneath the table. Alina sat on the floor, heart aching. "Who hurt you?" He couldn't answer. But the truth lived in his body language, in the way he never turned his back, on the way he watched every movement, waiting for something to go wrong. She knew that feeling, knew it too well. She saw her own fear reflected in his silence. 2 days later, thunder cracked overhead. The moment the sky roared, Shadow bolted slamming into the bathroom, knocking over a lamp on the way. He wedged himself between the toilet and the wall, trembling. Alina found him there, panting, eyes wide. She didn't try to pull him out. Instead, she sat beside him on the cold tile floor, hugging her knees. "My dad used to tell me storms were just the sky talking," she said, voice barely above the thunder. "I believed him until the fire." Her throat tightened. "I froze. The night the house caught fire, I froze. I didn't save him." She wiped her eyes roughly. "I never talk about this. Not to anyone," Shadow whimpered. She reached out slowly, open and rested it near his paw. He didn't move away. The storm quieted around 3 a.m. by then. Alina had stopped crying. Shadow hadn't moved, but his breathing had slowed. Then, in one small motion, he inched forward and rested his head in her lap. Alina didn't move. Her hand hovered for a moment before gently resting on his neck. They stayed like that, no words, no more tears, just two quiet hearts learning how to feel safe again. By the end of the week, Shadow followed her from room to room, not close, just enough to keep her in sight. He watched as she brushed her teeth, waited at the door when she took out the trash, wagged his tail once a cautious, hesitant flick when she said, "Good boy." She bought a leash and took him on his first walk around the block. He didn't bark at other dogs, didn't tug or whine. He just walked beside her head, low, ears perked. At night, he slept beside her bed on the rug by the second week. He slept with his back touching hers. She no longer dreamed about the fire. It happened while she was making breakfast. Shadow tried to steal a slice of toast and got his head stuck in the sleeve of her bathrobe hanging from a chair. She turned around and gasped his wide-eyed panic. The floppy fabric ears, the robe draped over him like a cape. Alina burst out laughing, real breathless laughter. Shadow froze, then barked. Once, short, confused. She couldn't stop laughing. He tilted his head. His tail wagged once. Then again, it was the first time in a long while that the house didn't feel like a grave. They settled into a rhythm: walks, meals, naps, quiet nights with soft music playing in the background. But one question kept scratching at her mind. The way a memory refuses to stay. Buried, where had he come from? His body bore old scars. His eyes held the weight of someone who had seen cruelty. No collar, no chip. Someone had left him. Or maybe, worse, she didn't say it out loud. Not yet, but deep down, she knew their peace wouldn't last forever. The knock came on a Sunday afternoon. 3 quick, heavy strikes on the door. Not hesitant, not friendly. Alina peeked through the peephole, heart skipping. A man stood there, tall, broad, clean-shaven, Holding a stack of documents, she opened the door halfway. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for my dog," the man said. "German Shepherd. Answers to Rex." Elena's heart thud. Ded. Shadow Dash, who had been lying peacefully near the window, lifted his head and froze at the sound of the man's voice. Shadow bolted up and backed into the hallway, his tail tucked, his body lowered. A soft whine escaped his throat. Elena watched in disbelief. She'd never seen him react this way. "He's afraid of you," she said, trying to keep her voice level. The man scoffed. "He's just timid." "He does that?" Shadow's eyes darted. His body trembled. But this wasn't timidity. This was fear. Deep, familiar, remembered. The man held out paperwork, vaccination records, ownership claims, and what looked like a registration certificate. "I have proof," he said. Elena looked at the papers, but didn't reach for them. Behind her, Shadow didn't move. He didn't bark. He didn't approach. He hid. "If he's yours," she said slowly, "why won't he come to you?" The man shifted uncomfortably. "Because you've clearly spoiled him." Elena's gut twisted. It wasn't the words. It was the way he said them. That night, Elena waited until dusk. When the man returned to his truck and drove off, she followed, staying 2 cars behind. Her hands were clenched around the wheel. He pulled into a run-down property just outside town. No fence, no lights, just a crooked mailbox and the distant bark of more than one dog from her parked car. She watched. He opened the back of his truck and dragged out another dog. A mutt, shaking, skin and bones. He yelled loud. Curses spilled into the night air. The dog cowered, tail between its legs. Elena's heart cracked. That was enough. She knocked on a neighbor's door the next morning. An older woman answered, guarded at first, till Elena explained. "You're not the first to ask," the woman sighed. "He's had ... too many dogs. We hear them crying at night, yelping, then nothing." She paused, but no one ever proved anything. Elena's voice shook. "What if I can?" The woman nodded. "Then don't wait." 2 days later, the man returned, this time angrier, more insistent. "You've had enough time." "I'm calling the cops." "Go ahead," Elena said, stepping between him and the door. "They'll be very interested in your treatment of animals." He froze. Her hand didn't shake this time. Her voice didn't falter. "He's not going back with you. Not now, not ever." Shadow stood behind her, head just visible over her shoulder. He didn't cover this time. He growled. That night, around 3 a.m., Elena was jolted awake by a loud cracked glass. A window. Her heart pounded as she jumped from bed, stumbling in the dark toward the hallway. Then another sound, a growl, fierce, low, protective. "Shadow." A man's voice shouted. A scuffle. Then silence. She found Shadow near the back door, panting hard, a gash across his shoulder, blood-stained. His fur shards of glass lay scattered around him. He'd chased the intruder off, but not without a cost. "Oh God, oh God," Elena sobbed, grabbing her keys. "Hold on, boy, hold on." She wrapped him in a blanket, cradled him against her chest, and sped toward the emergency vet. She filed a report the next morning with her statement, the neighbor's testimony, and now attempted break-in charges. The authorities acted. The man was arrested within 48 hours. Shadow's attacker, his abuser, wouldn't be coming back. Elena didn't rejoice, but she exhaled. It was over at the vet. While Shadow lay sedated with a bandaged shoulder, Alina sat beside him, hand resting gently on his back. A vet tech offered her a blanket and a kind smile. "You did good," she said. Alina shook her head. Not always. She hadn't told anyone about the fire, not in years. "I froze once," she whispered, "when my dad needed me. I didn't move. I was scared, and he..." Her throat closed. "I've carried that guilt every day." Shadow stirred. "I couldn't save him, but I could save this one." She stood slowly, wiping her face. Shadow blinked up at her groggily. "You fought for me," she said softly. "So I fought for you." Her voice cracked, but she smiled. "This time, I didn't freeze." After everything, after the trauma, the fear, the courtroom appearances, and the long, silent recovery, Alina didn't return to her old life. She didn't need to. Instead, she found herself walking into the local animal shelter 2 weeks after Shadow's final vet checkup. The place smelled like soap and fur and stories waiting to be rewritten. "I'd like to help," she said to the volunteer coordinator. "I know what it's like to feel scared and to heal slowly." They started, her with cleaning duties, then walks, then intakes. But she kept showing up, because every time she looked into the frightened eyes of a new arrival, she remembered Shadow, and every time she walked one of them into a foster home, or sat with a dog who just needed to be seen, she felt something deep inside her settle. She couldn't save her father, but she could help others find their way back. Shadow came with her most days. At first, he watched everything from beneath her desk at the shelter alert, but soon he began to emerge, to sit beside the kids who visited on school trips, to lie at the feet of the anxious teens struggling to stop shaking. He didn't bark, he didn't whine, he just stayed. One little boy with autism, silent 4 months, reached out one day and touched Shadow's head. Shadow licked his palm. The boy giggled. His mother cried. No one taught Shadow to be gentle. He simply remembered. The sky was overcast. The morning, Alina finally drove to the cemetery. She brought flowers, white ones, and Shadow. Her steps felt heavier the closer she got, but her heart didn't race like it used to. There was still pain, but it no longer controlled her. She knelt beside her father's grave, brushing the dirt from his name. "I miss you every day," she whispered. "And I'm sorry it took me this long to come." Her voice cracked. "But I think I finally understand what you meant. About courage, about choosing to show up, even when you're scared." Shadow sat beside her, quiet, watchful. "Couldn't save you," she said, tears falling. "But I saved him, and he saved me right back." She smiled then. "I hope you'd be proud of us." Alina had imagined healing as a grand moment, something loud, something dramatic, but it hadn't come that way. It came in quiet mornings where Shadow snored beside her, in cups of coffee she no longer drank alone, in the way her hands no longer shook when thunderstorms rolled in. It came in the choice to keep loving, to stay soft, to say yes when her heart still held cracks. Her redemption wasn't about fixing the past, it was about choosing compassion, again and again, until the wounds didn't define her anymore, and neither did her guilt. Almost 1 year to the day, the snow returned. Alina didn't fear it anymore. She zipped up her jacket, clipped Shadow's leash, and led him toward the place where it had all started, the old railroad crossing still dusted in white. The wind whispered through the trees. The tracks groaned faintly beneath distant weight. The world looked the same, but they weren't. Shadow walked calmly now, tail swaying, head held high. He didn't flinch. He didn't panic. He glanced up at Alina, waiting for her to speak. She knelt beside the tracks, gloved hand brushing the icy metal. "This is where you found me," she said softly. "Shadow licked her knuckles, and I found you." Snowflakes swirled around them, falling gently like blessings. Alina stood. Shadow pressed against her leg, leaning into her warmth. "We saved each other," she whispered. Shadow didn't respond with a bark or a wag. He simply stayed, and in that stillness, in that silent, sacred space, they understood. Their journey wasn't just about survival, it was about healing, together. Alina had once believed that healing would come like a miracle, loud, sudden, and unmistakable. But healing hadn't arrived in fanfare. It came disguised as a broken dog, standing alone on the train tracks in the middle of a snowstorm. A creature just as lost and bruised as she was. She hadn't known it at the time, but that moment, one she could have missed if she hadn't stayed late. If she hadn't looked twice, wasn't just about saving a life. It was about receiving one, because sometimes the universe doesn't hand you miracles wrapped in glory. Sometimes it hands you second chances wrapped in fur and silence. People often told Alina how lucky Shadow was that she had found him just in time, but they never saw the whole story. They didn't see the way Shadow laid beside her when the nightmares came, or the way he nudged her hand during moments when she didn't even know she was sinking. He never spoke. He didn't need to. His presence was enough, in his loyalty, his gentleness, and his unwavering nearness. Shadow gave Alina something she didn't know she still needed: a reason to stay. There were no grand gestures between them, no dramatic scenes, no movie-like declarations. Just quiet mornings with shared cups of tea. Just peaceful walks where neither needed to speak. Just a gentle paw resting near her foot while she read at night. That was what healing looked like. It wasn't fast. It wasn't flashy. But it was real, and every slow, tender moment they spent together was a stitch mending the parts of them both that had once been torn by loss and fear. Home, Alina learned, wasn't a place. It wasn't the walls she slept inside or the routine she followed. Home was Shadow. The way he waited at the door. The way he looked back at her during walks. The way he always stayed. Love wasn't found in grand moments. It was built slowly, bravely, in the decision to show up for one another every single day. Alina and Shadow didn't choose each other once. They chose each other every day. After that, and in doing so, they built something unbreakable. A life not born out of perfection, but out of presence, patience, and trust.